Alrighty, gun people, we're going to talk about 1100. I'm going to do a detailed breakdown, kind of show you what I look for. I don't have all the fancy up-close camera stuff, so if I go over something and you can't figure it out, I'm sure there's other videos out there, but I'll try to keep this on camera as best I can. Basically, I got my coffee, so that'll keep me on track. Got the 1100, got some oil. People have said, what do you use to get the rust off? I use this Safari Charlie. Works pretty good. It's all natural. It supposedly doesn't have chemicals. It doesn't stink. I like it. I think it's pretty good. They say you can use it as a lubricant and an oil also. You can use it for rust and wipe it off, and it'll also lube it. I still spray a little rim oil on mine, and there's other oils out there. I've used Break Free, LCP, all the Strike this and Strike Force, E-Force, Slick this, Corrosion X. So as far as lubricants, I mean, rim oil, you can get it at Walmart. It's readily available. Most gun shops carry it. It seems to work pretty good. Some people even use car oil. Got some Mobile 1 down there. If you don't have any oil at all, and you want to oil down your gun, a little Mobile, any oil, synthetic oil that you want to put on there, rub it on, then wipe it off. That'll help prevent rust also. So let's talk about the 1100 and a quick breakdown. And I'll be jumping back and forth because I'm trying to stay on focus here. Zoom this out just a little bit. Oh, I don't know if it's going to go far enough out for me to get this thing in here. Okay, basic 1100. You really don't need a bunch of tools to take this down. About the only tool I'm going to use, this is a Glock tool that I use to take down Glocks, but it's basically a punch. And I'm going to take these two pins out right here, and that's going to pull the trigger mechanism out. I'm going to pull this pin off, which is going to remove the bolt. I'm going to take this end cap off, which is going to remove this and give me access to the magazine tube. And then when the barrel will come off, and that's basically the breakdown. Now there is one step that I'm not going to cover here. Oh my God, I can't tell if I'm okay. There's one step I'm not going to cover here that I did on this gun because it was a used gun and I wanted to clean it. But I wouldn't go into this back area. If you own a gun for 10, 15 years, then I would take this apart. And basically you take these two screws out, and there's one screw in there because there is a spring and a pipe that runs right through the stock here. And there's a bolt right here that when you unscrew it, the stock pulls off and it gives you access to this tube. Now, I wiped down this tool because there's some rust on it. This gun was very neglected, really bad shape. So I wiped down the tube with some oil, cleaned it out. You can push in, move a little detent spring, and you can pull the spring out, clean the spring and clean the tube, put some oil on it, put it back together. Most people never take that apart. I did it. I'm not going to do it now because it's kind of a pain to get these wood screws out. I've already oiled it. It's got two rings. It's pretty simple. Once you take the one screw off, it's got two washers, and then this slides off. So it's not difficult. It's time consuming. So the first thing you do, take apart, of course, any gun, you want to make sure it's clear. So I'm going to lock it to the rear, make sure there's nothing in the chamber, and there's none in the magazine tube. And then on 1911, this end cap right here, basically it just unscrews. Now sometimes it's a little tough, so you have to put pressure on it. So I'll set it on the ground and I'll put pressure right here, and then I'm just going to unscrew this. Remember lefty loosey, righty tighty? So I got it started. Take the end cap off. Now some 1911s don't have a good end cap here, and the spring will come shooting out when you take this off. Either because somebody's lost the retaining cap, because they took it off and they weren't ready. So when you take this off, you kind of want to be ready for that spring to pop out. Normally it won't, but if it does, it's not that big of a deal. There's only a cap here, and then there's a spring. And if you have a tube in there, a choke tube, to stop you from loading, not a choke tube, a plug, it stops you from loading more rounds. If you use this gun for hunting, you're only allowed to have 3 rounds. 1 in the chamber and 2 in here. So there's a plug that they make that fits in here to stop you from loading more than 2 rounds. I take those plugs out. I don't go out and hunt except humans, and there's no limit on rounds when you're hunting humans. So I want the extra 2 rounds. I can get 4 rounds in here with one in the chamber. That makes it a 5-round shotgun versus a 3-round shotgun. The other day when I did the video, you notice I put 4 rounds in here and then I shot 4 rounds. If you get a new 1911, it won't take 4 rounds because there's a plug in here. And basically you remove that plug. I didn't bring the plug in to show you what it looked like. Sorry about that. So this little end cap here is just like a little tension screw. And you just got to kind of like work it around. I'm going to move this around and just kind of work it and pry it, and it'll pop right out and you'll see what it looks like. So once you get that end cap off, your wood can come off. And that'll give you access to all your other parts. So once you take this wood part off, I usually clean these up, make sure there's no dirt and everything in there, and then there's a little protective metal cap here that I kind of clean off, make sure there's no rust, and then I just spray this down with like Pledge or some sort of oil, whatever you use on your wood, a good wood oil or a Pledge or something, and I just polish that up. So now I'm going to take this little end cap off here, and I'll lay this down, and I don't know if you can see it or not. And again, I'm ready for the tension because as I work this out, this spring's going to come out, and if I'm not ready, I'll be chasing the spring across the thing. So, this is your magazine tube with your spring, and this is the cap that was on there. And these little slits right here is basically a compression. When you put it in there, it squeezes it and then it forces it back open, and that's what retains it. So the cap goes on here when you're putting it back together. Then you just slide that down and you kind of work that in there, and then that's your magazine tube spring and retaining pin. And then the only other thing in here is a little plug that you'll see on this end. If you look, and I brought a flashlight. If you look in here, can you see that little plug right there? It's right there. See that little plug? Well, that's going to come out. And basically that protects your spring. So when I turn this upside down, this little plug comes out. Now this was full of grit and dirt, and it wouldn't slide out easy, and it was filthy. So you may have to force this out with a little tube or something if it's dirty and messy and hadn't been cleaned. So basically that's going to go back in this tube just like this, so the bullets face this end and the spring is in the cup area. So basically on your spring, you're going to have this retaining cap on this side, and on the other side you're going to have your plug, that kind of where your rounds load. And then you have your spring. Now once I have all this out, your bolt here retains your barrel, so your barrel doesn't cough. So when you pull this back, it releases the barrel, and your barrel should come sliding off. This barrel's pretty tight. It was tight the other day. I thought it would loosen up because... So your barrel comes off. Here's your barrel, slides right off. And now this is your 2 major pieces. Most people don't even break this part down to clean it. I'm kind of a clean guy, so I like cleaning my guns. So there's really no parts on here except your barrel, and I fired a couple of rounds through this, and I don't know if you can see how clean it is, but you saw me shoot those rounds through here. And so I'll just look through the barrel at light and kind of make sure there's no pitting or anything. On this part where I clean it, I clean the inside of the tube, and then I clean the outside with oil. I clean in here, but this is where your compression is. This is where your little ring, this gap fits over this part right here. Okay? I'm going to let this bolt go forward and show you that this sits over. I don't know if I can put it on without putting it back in the barrel. It's on backwards right now, but basically this fits over this part right here. So because there's a gas ring, and this is the main failure of most 1911s, there's a little bitty plastic ring right here. And I'm going to pull this back a little bit. There's these two floating rings that need to be put in correctly. People take them apart and they don't look at the way they are and they put them back wrong. And then you're going to lose your compression. And these two things go over this O-ring, and then that cap holds that O-ring. So this O-ring right here is one of the critical failures of the 1100. I don't know if I said 1911 earlier, but I'm in 1100. So because it has screws here, remember the end cap we took off? We took this end cap off. Well, there's screws right here. Well, people will roll this over this, and it tends to rough up and makes little microfiber mini cuts on this thing, and then it'll cause this to break. So before you take this off, I get a little piece of saran wrap and just cover those grooves nice and tight. So I just wrap the saran wrap. Now when I slide this ring over, of course it's not working. If you get it underneath there, it will protect the ring from getting cuts, because you can get 3 of these for like $9 at Brownells. You can order them online. I keep an extra pack just in case. This is kind of like, if your gun isn't cycling, isn't ejecting, isn't kicking out the rounds, this is probably the culprit. This and dirt. So then when I put this back on, let me, well, I'm going to put it on now. I just pulled it off. So now we're going to get these two rings will just slide right off. Again, you want to look at how they're placed. And the way I remember it is this side is flat. So the flat side goes in first on the first ring, because if I look at it this way, it's concaved, and this side is flat. So flat goes in first. On the second ring, you have one side that's tall and one side that's not. And it goes in like so. So again, to me it's flat. The side with the biggest edge is what goes up top here. And then that fits in there. Then these two rings go on. Then your plastic ring goes on. And these are the things that people kind of tend to mess up when they put it back together. They'll take it apart and then they'll get these rings messed up. Okay, so once you have the rings off and you got your end cap off, this little pin right here on your bolt, I guess called a recharging handle or a charging grip. Basically, you pull it back and you lock it. Well, it just pulls straight out. So when I pull this out, it comes straight out. And it goes straight back in. There's a gap right here, so it's pretty easy. It goes straight back in when you're putting it together. So I'm going to pull it out, which makes my bolt to work and come out. So now that I don't have this handle right here, this bolt will slide right out. But it won't slide out until you hit a little tricky release. Now on 1911s or 1100s, this mag thing won't go in unless you press the silver part. It locks unless you press the silver. I'm assuming it's some safety BS, but I have no clue. Somebody who's an 1100 fanatic who knows more about it than I do can say. But you can't press here. If you have an 870, I carried an 870 as a cop for years. And it doesn't have that. You just stick your rounds in there and you load quick and you don't have to hit this little release. But on 1100, you got to hit their little release. So inside this area, this flat side right here, I'm going to reach in and I'm going to pull this way. So there's a little bitty release that this bar hooks on right here. And when I press that in, it's going to allow me to slide this bolt out. And it takes a few times of doing it, but there's only one thing on this side that moves in when you press on it. So basically you just stick your finger here and you feel around till something moves this way, and then when you hit that release, it allows this bolt to slide on out. And then when it slides out, I have this piece and this piece. So this bolt fits on here, pretty simple. It only goes one way. I mean, you can put it this way, But if you try to put it back in the gun, you're going to notice that the extractor, the thing that grabs the shell and pulls it, that little hook right there, is facing the wrong way. Plus, the firing pin has to be facing the same way as the bullet's going. It's got to be backwards like this so the hammer can hit this. So it only pretty much goes on one way. It's pretty simple. So you have your bolt, and then I don't know what they call this. I just call it the bolt carrier group because it carries the bolt. Okay? And that's it for this piece. So again, when I'm cleaning this, I'll do it over here fairly quickly. I'm going to wipe this down. When I was cleaning it earlier, I got a Q-tip. I got in all the corners, sprayed it down with some rim oil. You can still see some rim oil on here. Making sure all my corners, if there was a little rust, I put some of that Safari and I put a rag and I just rubbed and rubbed. Got a little bit of that Safari Charlie, it's a little oil, and I just rubbed and rubbed. I looked at the rag and it turned brown and had rust on it. I got a clean part and kept doing that till the rag didn't turn rusty anymore. And that's how I remove the rust. So this little tube, because this tube feeds, this is usually just filthy in here. This is where all your gas and everything, your carbon starts building up. So this tube has to be cleaned out. And again, I just take I keep my old Holy socks that doesn't work, and then on something like this, I can just shove it down there, take a rag, shove it through there, spray some oil down in there, and shove it through there. And again, I'm going to do this really quick over here, but I'm just kind of explaining on kind of what I'm doing. And now, I'm going to pull out the trigger group. Trigger housing, trigger group, whatever you want to call it. And there's two pins right here. One here and one there. That I'm just going to punch out. I'm going to push them out. There's one pin. And it came out, and there's two pins. Now these two pins, one's smaller than the other. So the smaller one goes in the front, and the larger one goes in the back. And those are two pins. And they got little grooves, so they just slide in and out pretty easy. Again, you'll be able to tell the holes. This one's going to be too big in one hole, this one's going to be too small or too big to fit in the other hole. So just the big one goes in the back, the little one goes in the front, no big deal. Again, those pins, rusty, had a little rust on it, hadn't been taken out, really hard to get out. You saw how easy I pushed them out? I had to put this in there with a little hammer and get them out before because they were just so grimy. Once you get your pins out, your trigger housing will just pull right out. So I'm just going to pull on that a little bit, and it's going to just come right out on me. Okay? And now I have nothing but a hollow shell of a gun here. Oh, I don't know why I went to strobe. And that's what the basic interior. So all that needs to be clean, wiped out. This little bitty pin right here, you see that little thing that moves there? I don't know if I can hold this light here and get this out. So this little thing right here is your spring that goes back, and I'm pressing it, and that's the spring that runs down here. So this spring in this housing here is a spring, and the end cap is right here. So this is what throws your bolt forward. Okay? Now, if you notice this, those rails are down, and the top side is flat. Because I'm getting reflection here, I could barely even see this, so I hope you guys can see this, but it's flat on top, and then it's more concave on the bottom. And that's the way it's got to go back in. Now this comes out pretty easy. Basically, you just pull forward on it, and it's going to snap out of that little ring there, and there's that little spring right there. Again, this was like black carbon filled, just caked on. All that carbon just slows down the gun. It breaks down the mechanics. So, you know, I had to take a little 1000 grit sandpaper and kind of get some of the carbon that was so tough on here off. Then I oiled it down, it's good to go. So when this goes back in, you just squeeze these two little parts here. Remember, it goes in this way, not this way, because the flat side here goes up, and then this little two springs right here goes right back here in this little catch hole. And again, I don't know if you can see that in there. There's a little bitty hole right there, and that's what it fits in. And that's basically a breakdown of the 1100. Now, what do I do when I clean it? First thing I normally do is I just give it a good squirt of oil all over. Just to kind of let it, I'm going to squirt all in here, and this magazine tube here. This tube, nobody ever cleans a magazine tube. I got so much crap out of here, it was filthy. And I don't know if you're going to be able to see in here or not, but we'll try it. Boy, this flashlight's on us. So, can you see down that tube? Again, it was just black and dirt and grimy and burnt powder. And now it should be pretty clean because I only fired, what, 4 rounds out of it. So, it's pretty clean. I'm going to do a quick wipe down. But again, depending on how dirty it is depending on how much time you want to spend cleaning it. So, I'll put some rim oil down it, let it soak in there, get all the grooves, all the pipes, all in here. I want good oil, and now it's starting just to penetrate and break down any carbon. My end cap, I'm going to squirt it on the grooves. It was kind of rusted inside the grooves. Had a lot of carbon buildup. The 2 rings should be fairly noticeable that they're rings. This still has some carbon on it, but it's a hell of a lot better than it was. So I'm going to squirt those down with some oil and let them set. Spring, squirt it down with some oil, let it set. Bolt carrier, 1 little piece of slides. I'm going to squirt it all down with some oil down this hole here, get some oil in here. Hopefully that's not getting on the lens. And then the bolt doesn't come apart more than this, or I don't take it apart more than this. It's got your firing pin, that's your firing pin spring. When this is in here, you can test the firing pin by pressing on that, and it should bounce back. That tells you your firing pin spring's working. When you press forward, you're not going to see the firing pin come out, because when it's hit hard, it'll come out and it'll fly out and hit it. And then your extractor here has a little spring in it, and that hooks around the round and pulls that round out. So again, this bolt, man, you couldn't even tell. It was almost, I thought it was black. It was just disgusting. So I took it apart. Some of this right here was like really bad, so I took like a little Dremel with a little cotton patch, and I just kind of polished that down because it was so dirty, and got rid of all the crap. And then that removed any roughness, because when you, again, this is sliding in and out, and every time you can make it smooth, you reduce friction, and when you reduce friction, you increase the operation of the gun. So again, the bolt, it's pretty clean, but I'm going to go ahead and spray it down with oil because I'm going to wipe it down before I put it back together. Retaining pin, if it's plastic, you don't really need oil, but I still put oil on my plastic because it just removes the carbon and helps break down the carbon. Trigger housing, this is your trigger housing. This is cocked right now. You don't want to be pulling the trigger and letting things fly, but I'm going to pull this trigger and it's going to release the hammer right here. And when I pull this, did I put it on safe? There it goes. Whew. That's going to let that fly forward. So I have this open. These are the edges that I'm looking for worn parts that are rough. I feel around here if there's any rough edges. I take a little bit of 1000 grit sandpaper and smell it off. Now you don't want to get the rough edges that actually catch. There's a little bitty hook right here that actually catches when you push this back and holds it. So you don't want to file that down or polish that too much, but anywhere that feels like there's a burr or there's something to catch, then you want to do that. And again, this, if I press right here, it lets this go up. That's your pin that goes up and down. So again, on this, I spray it down. I don't take anything off. I spray it with oil. And then I wipe it down with a Q-tip, get any black and stuff off. And then at the end, if you got an air hose, the best way to clean guns is air hose. They used to do this in the military. I have a big thing set up. And you just... And that's going to blow out any little bits and pieces that you may not get in the corners. So all that oil soaks it up and grabs it. Then you come around with air hose and you blow it out nice. And that'll make any trigger mechanism or anything you can't get to that's kind of a little dirty and you don't know how to get it apart anymore, I mean, I'm sure I could take this all apart and put it back together, but there's just no point. There's not a lot. There's a little spring right here, there's a spring here. If I really want to do a decal cleaning or something wrong, I could take it apart more, but really this is far down as I want to go. So again, spraying it down with oil, wiping it with a Q-tip, cleaning out. The pins, the 2 pins I pulled out, go right here. One here and one here. So this slides in and then those 2 pins go in those holes. So I put a Q-tip through those holes and make sure they're nice and smooth so those pins come in and out easy. Again, when I pulled them out before, there was rust, dirt, burnt powder, really kind of crappy in there, so it was hard to get apart. So I'm going to go ahead and lock this back up because I pulled it when it was locked out, so I want to leave it the way it was. So you just saw pretty much what I'm going to do to this trigger housing. I sprayed it down with oil and hosed it off, so I'm good. Again, in here, I grab an old t-shirt, and I'm just going to get all the more I move this, I can tell if there's rust coming off or not by looking at my rag. If it's white, and I'm rubbing, and when I pull it off, you see a little brown tint there, just a little bit. I don't know if you can see it in the light. That means there's still a little minor rust residue on this thing. You can see more here. So I only fired 4 rounds, but because, you know, they say you're supposed to clean a gun after you shoot it and then clean it 3 days later. Because as the steel cools and heats and as it sits, the carbon and stuff and dirt will kind of work its way out of the steel. Now, I don't know how much truth there is to it, but I do know I've cleaned a gun and got no dirt off it, and 3 days later I come back and there's dirt. And it ain't done nothing. So there must be something to it. So I'm going to clean out this housing really good. I'm going to make sure there's no... And here, again, but when I was doing it before, I took Q-tip, I was cleaning out everything, rubbing it. If I can get a clean Q-tip and rub, and my Q-tip's clean, I know my gun's clean. If I rub a Q-tip, my Q-tip's dirty, I know I missed something. So I use a lot of Q-tips when I clean guns. You saw me sprayed oil down this tube, so I have to get something to wipe that out. Again, this is the sock that I was using when it was when I first cleaned it. And you can tell with the sock, it wasn't the white clean sock. And so now I'm just going to roll this up to where I can get pretty much a clean part. I'm going to shove it in there and then just take a guide rod and push that through. And then that's going to come out down here. And again, I would do that until I had it clean. So if you look down the tube, you shine this at light, you should see nice, shiny, clean tube. And that's the way you want your tube to be. So we're done with the wipe down. I've wiped the tube, I've wiped the oil, I've cleaned it, so this part's pretty much done. At this point, if I wanted to put some pledge or something on this, I would do it now while all this is out, so that pledge, I don't get overspray. If you want to wrap a towel around this part, and when you do the pledge, that'll keep the pledge from getting on your metal. I don't think it's going to hurt it, but I'd rather my oil be on here and not pledge. So, let me check my time here. It doesn't show the time on this side. Damn, I haven't had any of my coffee. Oh shit, 28 minutes? Alright, well I guess I'll have to do another one on putting this thing back together. So I'll start another one, because they'll only let me do like 30 minutes on here. So we'll end this there and I'll come back and do another one. Part 1 of 2.